So the Texas suppressor lawsuit, which seeks to stop the NFA and ATF's regulation of suppressors, is now being argued. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank everybody who's currently subscribed to the channel, who supported the channel. We are rapidly approaching 500,000 subscribers. So if you're not currently subscribed or you're a long-time lurker, please consider subscribing. But regardless, I want to thank everybody who has been supporting the channel. Also, I want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee has amazing coffee, and they are also huge Second Amendment supporters. They have dedicated roasts like for GOA, where if you purchase that specific coffee, that roast, then some of the proceeds will go directly to that organization to help in the 2A fight. So if you're interested, you can check them out using the link down below. And also, if you use the code ARMSCHOLAR, you can get 10% off of your order. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the Texas Suppressor Freedom lawsuit, which aims to eliminate the NFA and ATF's regulation of suppressors. This case we will be discussing is called Paxton v. Dettelbach. In this case, the state of Texas has now responded to the ATF's attempts to have this case completely thrown out with a motion for summary judgment. In their recent brief, the state of Texas refutes all of the ridiculous arguments that the ATF is now making to win a motion for summary judgment, and that includes arguments like the ATF saying that suppressors are not arms and that they are not protected under the Second Amendment. Now, for those not aware what this lawsuit entails, this lawsuit is in regards to Texas House Bill 957. HB 957 was passed, and it essentially exempts from federal regulation all suppressors that are made and remain within the state of Texas. The claim behind this law is that since these items are made and sold in the state of Texas, they do not fall under interstate commerce, and therefore they fall outside the purview of federal regulation by the ATF. So the goal of Texas in passing this law was to remove made in Texas suppressors from federal regulation. Well, after this law passed, of course, the ATF didn't like that, so they sent out a warning letter to all FFLs and all individuals within the state of Texas, saying that they would still enforce the NFA and GCA's regulations and laws against anyone who maybe purchases or sells these made in Texas suppressors. And in response to that, Texas then filed a lawsuit on behalf of individual Texas plaintiffs, and they sued the ATF. And the whole question is whether or not the state of Texas can pass a law like this that essentially excludes made in Texas suppressors from federal regulation. In the original complaint, the state of Texas argued that federal regulation of these items that are made and stay within the state of Texas is not permitted since the law does not impact interstate commerce. They also argued that the federal regulation of these items by the ATF drastically impacts Second Amendment rights and allows also for an impermissible tax on a constitutional right. The state of Texas's arguments were later strengthened when the Supreme Court issued their opinion in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin decision. That decision set the record straight, essentially, that the correct type of analysis when looking at the Second Amendment should be text as informed by history and tradition. Now, multiple times in this case, the ATF tried to avoid this very burden by arguing that the Second Amendment is not implicated in this case, and essentially that suppressors are not bearable arms and therefore are not protected by the text of the Second Amendment, and therefore also that the ATF can regulate these items. What's interesting in all these arguments, when it's convenient for the ATF, they argue that suppressors are not bearable arms, that they're not arms, and therefore they're not protected by the Second Amendment. And also, when it's convenient for them, and when they regulate these items, they outright claim that they do have statutory authority to regulate these items because under the statute and the definition, they are defined to actually be firearms. So on one hand, they're saying, no, these aren't arms, but on the other hand, they are treating them to be actually firearms. Now, currently, the court has set this case to be heard and resolved on summary judgment motions. Both Texas and ATF had filed for cross motions for summary judgment, which means that each side wants a court to rule in their favor, and each side is saying, we believe that our position is correct, and therefore the court should rule in our favor. Now, recently, the state of Texas presented a brief against the ATF's position, and essentially they completely tear down the entire position that the ATF is taking. In the brief, the state of Texas argues that despite the NFA's inclusion of firearm suppressors in its definition of firearm, ATF argues that the Second Amendment does not apply to the making of firearm suppressors for non-commercial personal use because, and then they quote the ATF, under DC v. Heller, The Second Amendment extends only to instruments that constitute bearable arms. And then the state of Texas responds to that by saying, plaintiffs have already addressed this issue. Whether a firearm suppressor is itself an arm is not the proper question post-Bruin. The Second Amendment regulates conduct, not arms. The right to keep and bear arms includes the right to keep and bear all kinds of arms. For instance, arms with or without suppressors, laser sights, scopes, tactical slide racks, biometric trigger locks, bipods, folding stocks, extended magazines, mounted lights, speed loaders, holsters, etc. It is immaterial whether the arms at issue are accessories that improve the usage of a firearm or parts necessary for the use of a firearm, because both instances involve conduct covered by the Second Amendment. Similarly, the conduct of driving a car includes the conduct of driving a car equipped with a muffler, whether or not a muffler is itself a car or whether or not a muffler is necessary to the operation of a car. And the right to free press covers ink and paper, even though ink and paper is not itself press, and even though it is possible to communicate words without ink and paper, audibly and digitally. So in this section, the state of Texas points out that suppressors clearly fall under the protection of the Second Amendment. The ATF can allege, if they want, that these are not arms, but the Second Amendment protects also other things like lawful conduct. And arms also are not just excluded to firearms. It includes all types of arms. Then Texas goes on to point out that the ATF's position that they would even potentially be able to regulate these items because they are dangerous and unusual arms is simply not true. They then say that yet ATF argues that they are, first by noting that there are records of some crimes being committed by persons using firearms equipped with firearm suppressors pre-1934, and that there are reports of people using firearms with firearm suppressors in crimes more recently. But that is not the test. All weapons, indeed all things, are sometimes used in crime. Firearm suppressors are not dangerous, even though they are occasionally, very occasionally used in crime. Although there are 2.6 million registered firearm suppressors in the US, ATF has only recommended 44 defendants a year for prosecution on silencer-related violations. That number, they point out, includes prosecutions for possession crimes. This essentially all points to the fact, and what Texas is arguing here, is the fact that suppressors are not dangerous in the way that the ATF is trying to frame them as. It does not meet the dangerous and unusual test outlined in Heller and then affirmed also in Bruin. These items simply are just not dangerous, even though the ATF is trying to argue that they are. They then point out that suppressors are also not unusual. In fact, they are in common use. The state of Texas argues that ATF admits that there are 2.6 million registered firearm suppressors, and they are legal in 42 states. They are in common use, just like AR-15s are in common use, as the DC Circuit Court found, because approximately 1.6 million AR-15s alone have been manufactured since 1986. They argue that by the very numbers admitted by the ATF, suppressors are clearly in common use across the US, and based on this, the state of Texas argues that the judge here should grant their motion for summary judgment and rule that the ATF does not have the authority to regulate suppressors that are made and remain within the state of Texas. So that is what's going on in the Made in Texas suppressor lawsuit for everyone who's been asking. Now, regardless, I think this is one of those cases that's destined for an appeal. It's going to go to the higher courts. It's going to go to the Fifth Circuit for review. But right now, there is a battle to see who will win the summary judgment. Is it going to be the state of Texas, or is it going to be the ATF? But if we get any more information, I will let you all know. Also, if you like this video, like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, or fuel Algor's rhythm, as all you OGs know. It helps to signal to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.